Well, thank you, Howard, and y'all bear with me. I was asleep like 35 minutes ago, and one thing I did find out going through seminary is I'm really not a public speaker. I don't mind doing it, but I'm not great at it, and I'm not a natural teacher. That's not my gifting, and so that was kind of part of the story that didn't really make a lot of sense. It's like, here I am, I'm going from commercial real estate, which I'll talk about, into an area where it's centered around preaching and teaching, and I get there and I'm like, well, this isn't really what I'm here to prepare to do. It was really more about going back into my original vocation and angling it and having a different perspective. So anyway, bear with me. I'm still kind of waking up here, but as Howard said, I'm Greg Spillyards. I have wife, 3 daughters, 17, 15, and 13. My wife's from Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm originally from Arkansas. Moved over here as a kid. Went to Christian Brothers High School. Then went over to Arkansas to college. Met my wife. She was coming here for grad school. It made sense for us to just come back to Memphis. And been here and loved Memphis. And Memphis has loved us ever since 2001. In June of 2001, I started at CBRE. And thought that I had landed where I was going to be for the rest of my life. Loved every second of it from the first day. And in fact, so June of '01, I started CBRE as a broker. We were opening an East Memphis office. I was 22 years old, low man on the totem pole. And 3 months after I was hired, I'm on the 7th floor of this building, start seeing FedEx planes flying across the sky, one after another, find out, about 9/11. And in my world, real estate-wise, came to a screeching halt. Everything just shut down. Our trajectory that we were on as a company, or at least as the East Memphis office, pretty much came to a halt. And I'm sitting there twiddling my thumbs. I've cold called like every business in the city, and I'm like, how can I prove my worth here? And I'm going to my boss saying, are y'all going to fire me? Or, so I ended up going into construction management. Knew nothing about construction. But our vice president of development at the time, Kevin Clarkson, was diagnosed with cancer in spring of 2002. And they said, Greg, you're responsible for all tenant infill construction that we do across the city. I'm like, all right, well, I don't know what I'm doing, but here I go. So I did that I got into it. I loved it. I did that for 2 years while Kevin was going through cancer treatment. Then he went into full remission, and he comes back. He's like, do you want to keep on doing this? So I said, sure, it's good. I was seeing like 80% of the deals that were coming through CB's office, so it was pretty cool. I was on the construction side of it. I was understanding the numbers. And I stuck around. I did that for about 2.5 more years. And then decided to go back into brokerage. So fast forward in '07, CB had the opportunity to take over Bellbrook Industrial Park, which is now a 50-year-old industrial park on Brooks Road. It's in a very kind of, I don't know how to describe the area. It's not necessarily underserved, but it's kind of a left behind area. In industrial real estate, everything's kind of moved to southeast Shelby County. Fayette, Marshall County, with big box, high clear height buildings, wide truck courts, and Bellbrook is just like this kind of bread and butter regional distribution facility. It's 1.6 million square feet. They come to me and they say, hey Greg, we want to build a team that will manage this property, lease the property. It's at 65% occupancy. We want to get it to 85% occupancy in 3 years and then sell it. And we want you to kind of run that whole brokerage process. I knew construction management, I knew property management, so they felt like I was the right guy for that. So, and it was kind of a sweet deal. It was, I'd been a straight commission broker, and they're like, we're going to pay you a base salary for you just to commit to Bellbrook. And then we're going to, pay you a commission on top of that, and we're going to have a bonus structure for you hitting certain milestones. I'm like, man, this is great. And they're like, but the one catch is you got an office at Bellbrook. And so I'm in my office out at Southwind. I'm thinking, man, I don't want to drive to Bellbrook every day. And then the bad part is there wasn't an office built out for us. I mean, I had to go and plug into old retail bay that didn't even have heat. We'd fire up a propane heater every morning to just knock the chill off, and then we'd work in there, and it was like a greenhouse effect. The sun would hit the windows. We started on January 17th, 2007, and so we had been there for 2 weeks. There's a lot more detail than I was going to get into, but now I think I kind of need to share it. We had been there for 2 weeks. Tenant walks in the front door, auto glass distributor, and he tells us he's filing for bankruptcy. 52,000 square feet. I'm like, dang, I mean, it's like a punch in the gut. And I said, all right, well, I hadn't even been out really to explore the property. And so I said, well, can I go walk through your space? He said, yeah, sure, come on. So we were walking through the space, and I see all these guys walking around up and down the aisles, taking inventory. I'm like, well, who are these guys? He goes, well, this is Migrant Auto Glass. They're out of California. They're buying all our inventory. They're going to open a distribution facility here. So the CEO happened to be there. So I went up and talked to him. I said, hey, we can make this real easy for you. And this space was old. It was not to standards that Migrant was looking for. I said, look, we've got a brand new space 3 buildings over that you can just move this inventory right on over there. Week and a half later, we signed a 52,000 square foot 10-year lease with Migrant Auto Glass. I mean, leases don't get done in 2 weeks, right? I mean, that just doesn't happen. And from that point, I knew this was going to be a unique experience. I mean, this was just going to be, and things like that happen over and over again. I like to tell people we kind of took apartment leasing to industrial real estate. We just simplified it, and we got spaces ready. Tenants came in. We averaged 7,500 square feet a week for a solid year and a half. So that goes into the recession, right? So we're flowing right into 08. We do have tenants leaving, but we're easily replacing them. We're a solution for many businesses who, I mean, we had a very aggressive owner. We were cutting rates down to half of what people were paying in other parts of the city, and so we were just churning and burning, and we stabilized the property by mid '08. The property ended up being like the signature property in their portfolio of this national portfolio that included like resorts and retail and hotel. This dumpy 40-year-old property in South Memphis was like the shining star. So they didn't want to sell it. They were like, this is great. So at that time, I had a leasing assistant. I had a brokerage assistant, and this thing had become like I could do it in my sleep. And so I kind of moved away from the transactional stuff, and I started kind of getting out in the community. Started meeting with the tenants, started meeting with stakeholders in Whitehaven and the surrounding area. Soup Campbell, I know he's come and spoke. Soup helped get us involved at Bethel Grove Elementary. We started a deal called Integrity Now, where we rewarded students for attendance, for just things that they did throughout the week to show integrity, and did little presentations and everything. And then in May of 08, I was at a 5th grade banquet at Bethel Grove Elementary, and there were all these kids, they're all dressed up, and most of them were there with their grandparents, and they had this just innocence about them. There was this one girl, she had perfect attendance from the 1st grade. And I found out from one of the teachers that no one had been bringing her to school. This kid had been getting up on her own every morning and getting herself to school. And I was like, the drive that's in that kid. And I'm sitting up on the stage because I had a presentation to make, and I'm looking at her, and I'm thinking about, she's in 5th grade, what's going to happen to her this summer? What's going to happen to her 2 years from now? And it crushed me, man. I became face to face with this reality that's all around our city. And I really can't describe this other than God started removing from me this passion for my career and for transactional real estate, and started angling me more and more towards how do I serve the city? How do I serve that girl? Of course, I had 3 daughters at the time. They were at the time 5, 3, and 1. Maybe I saw them in her eyes, and that was the soft spot in my heart. And so to kind of transition to my family, my oldest daughter at the time was really struggling in school. We knew she had some form of learning disability, but we didn't really know what it was. She's almost 6. She'd struggled through kindergarten. She had speech, she was taking speech therapy 4 times a week. And we really didn't know what the solution for her was, for even first grade. My second daughter, had right after she was born, I got to back up a little bit. So my second daughter, right after she was born, my wife and I would wake up in the middle of the night. My wife would, I was going through all this stuff at work and, just this heart thing, this head thing. And my wife would wake up, she'd go down the hall to feed Emma, my second daughter. And I would wake up and I couldn't go back to sleep. And the only thing I would do, I would just start praying. And it really wasn't even a conscious, I'm just going to start praying. I would just start praying that, just connecting with God in some way. And it was a listening prayer. And I sensed God saying to me, something's going to change in your life. It's not going to change right now. Don't go out and do anything rash. But this is not what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And this, second daughter had been born and didn't know really what to do with that. I didn't say a word to my wife about it because I didn't want to freak her out. But I knew it was real. I mean, it was very real. And this went on for about a month and a half. And then one Sunday afternoon, we're driving down Humphreys Boulevard, and my wife goes, "Greg, I got to tell you something." She said, "When I'm in Emma's room at night feeding her," she said, I've been praying, and I'm sensing God saying He's calling you into some form of ministry." And she had not said anything because in her mind it's we're going to be able to be missionaries in Southeast Asia, and she's like, "I don't want to do that." So she was freaked out about it. And so we kind of take this information, we don't know what to do with it. Then we're in this small group, in this kind of couples discipleship group. And one night we're walking back out to the car, and we had not said anything to anyone about this. And one of the wives in the group comes running out into the front yard and says, "Hey guys, hold on, before y'all leave, I just got to tell you something. Y'all just put it on my heart. Y'all are going to think I'm completely crazy. But at night, I just have been praying for y'all, and I have sensed God saying to tell you guys that He's calling you into some form of ministry." and Crystal and I we almost pass out. We're like, well, I didn't almost pass out. I was like, "That's crazy. No, he's not. No, that's insane." So we go. I go to meet with our pastor, Bill Balknight, at the time at Christ Church, and I said, "Hey, what do you think this is all about? This is kind of what's been going on at work. This is." And he said, "Well, I would start getting involved in leadership in the church." Well, as soon as I found out when you raise your hand to do anything in the church, all of a sudden it's I was chairman of men's ministry within a month, and I'm like, what have I gotten myself into? And I told you that one. And so he said, that's what I do first. Well, guys, this was, I did that, and on the outside it looked like, I'm becoming sanctified and becoming holier than thou, and it was not aligned with what my life was like. I mean, I had all that going on, but if somebody called for a happy hour at 4:00, I was there. And usually with me, because I'm very social, a happy hour turned into a happy till midnight, and my life did not align with what this call was. My life didn't align with what I was doing at the church. I can remember going to prayer breakfast and praying before the prayer breakfast and being there, and then all of a sudden going out and playing 36 holes of golf and just getting trashed. I mean, and it's like, what is going on? And it was, I was running from it. Business was really good. I didn't see any reason to disrupt things. But one of our maintenance guys on that team, I really didn't plan on saying any of this part, but one of the maintenance guys on that team at Bellbrook, if you could be addicted to something, he was addicted to it. All right. But he and I would always be the last ones at the office. And he and I got along so well because he was just one of these guys, he just got things done. And in fact, he was one of the main reasons I took the job, was because I knew I could, he would help me keep my promises that I was making to the tenants, to the client. And all of a sudden, Easter Sunday, his daughter says, Dad, I want to be in church on Easter Sunday. He's like, sure, my daughter wants to go to church, I'm going to church. Well, he has this face-to-face with Jesus. And I'm telling you, this guy, I mean, he still is struggling with addiction on Monday morning, but this guy looked different when he showed up at work on Monday morning. He tells us all about the story. He got involved in the church. His life radically changed over the course of about a year and a half of us working together. Meanwhile, I'm the guy who's like experienced this call into ministry, involved in my church, been saved since I was 12, and I've become a raging asshole at work. I mean, I'm chewing out contractors if their numbers aren't, where they need to be for us to make a deal and all this stuff. And so this maintenance guy hears me one night, comes around the wall to my desk, and basically pulls me by my collar. He's like, hey, bud, I need you to be the man you were when we started this thing. And it just, stopped me in my tracks. And that's really where I was like, okay, this is what discipleship's about, right? I mean, here's a guy, he's been a believer for a year, and he is calling me to the mat. And so there were a couple other things that happened during that time that were like, okay, I need to get reconnected. I need to really think about what is this. I believe in God. Do I really believe God? I mean, do I believe God is calling us to do something different? And so then through some conversations with the pastors, through some conversations through that small group, people started asking, well, have you thought about, a career change? Have you thought about seminary? I thought about career change, but I had not thought about seminary. And there's just this energy that was behind it. It was like, no, I think you might really get some clarity if you started enrolling in some seminary courses. And there were a lot of like vocational courses, that you could take that would kind of help you, apply your faith with work. And so I thought it was crazy. I didn't know really where it was headed. I enrolled at Asbury, started taking Asbury Theological Seminary, and the reason I enrolled at Asbury was because Christ Church has a grant that had been in place for like 30 years that basically if you're a member of Christ Church and you're going to Asbury, they pay your tuition. Like no one had tapped into this thing. I wrote a letter to the church, told them what I was doing. They said, sure, go ahead, we'll pay for it. And so in 2009, I started taking classes online at Asbury. And then God was pressing in on us. And I called this take the next step, because even if you take 100 steps backwards, turn around, don't be ashamed, look Christ in the face and know He is still present, He's still loving you, He is still calling you into something. And so we just made an about-face turn. My wife and I, together, we said we're going to take this more seriously. And but He was pressing on us, and I knew I was not supposed to be in commercial real estate that much longer. I knew I was supposed to dislodge from that. And so, but I had this commitment to my client, right? I mean, we still needed to get the property sold. We still needed to get, a little bit more occupancy, and so that's kind of driving me, this commitment to my client. And so in July of 2009, we're at worship at Christ Church, and I've never heard this done before or since, but they have a call. They say, if anyone is in this room that believes they've been called into some form of ministry vocationally, even if you haven't acted on it, like, why don't you come down to the altar? And it just like, and we were supposed to have been out of town that weekend. We decided to stay, and it was like, and then they sing the hymn, "Here I Am, Lord," and it's just like piercing my heart. And I grabbed my wife's hand and I said, if we don't at least just go to the altar, we're never going to take a step. We're never going to get to where God's calling us to go. And we go down the aisle, and I'm telling y'all, if the altar had not been where it was, I would have fallen on my face. I was so overwhelmed with the power of the Spirit. And we kneel at the altar, and one of my friends, one of the pastors, comes around, and he's got his robe on. He goes, man, hey, I just happen to have this in my pocket this morning as a magnet to Asbury Seminary. And he goes, have you ever really thought about full-time, like moving to Asbury and going to seminary? I'm like, no, I'm not leaving Memphis. Like, I'm supposed to be here. But anyway, so the next morning, a broker in town who I'd been courting his client to locate all their operations to Bellbrook, that next morning I had a voicemail on my phone from him saying, hey, my client picked up another customer and they want to move their entire operation to Bellbrook Industrial Park, which sealed the deal. I mean, it was like abundantly clear that I could gracefully separate from that. It took about 5 more months to get the deal done, but in November, I went to tell my boss, and just to give you an indication of where my actions had been relative to where God was working on us. I went to tell my boss, I said, hey man, you're not gonna believe this, but I'm gonna leave my job and we're gonna go to full-time seminary. He starts laughing. He's like, man, he goes, if you give me 100 guesses what you were coming in here to tell me, that would not have been one of them. And he thought I was coming in to tell him I was going to work at Commercial Advisors. So when I told him I was going to seminary, he's like, sure, yeah, you want to go to seminary? Go ahead. He goes, you stay. So we put our house on the market. This is in 2009. In November of 2009, worst time of the year, worst time of the century to try to sell a house. We set up a whole succession plan. My brokerage assistant was going to roll into my job. And they basically told me, like Kevin Adams and my client and everybody, they said, look, you got a job here as long as you're in Memphis. But when things start to change, you start to think you're about to move, just tell us. Well, months go by. I'm still taking courses online. May of 2010, God's pressing on us so hard to finally make a move, take the next step, that I say, I tell him, I say, look, I'm going to just go ahead, take the step out of here, and I'll find something. And then the next day, Christ Church calls me and said, hey, why don't you come over here and be director of outreach? You're already taking classes in seminary. So I leave CB in summer of 2010, go to Christ Church as director of outreach. Salary cut in half, totally different gig. I didn't know if it was really right, but I knew it was what I needed to do to dislodge me from the distraction that I was a part of. And so I was there. Very tumultuous time at Christ Church. Our senior pastor was asked to leave a month after I showed up. It was, I'm convinced I was there basically just to love on the church. I mean, I was literally the only person on staff. There were probably 3 of us on staff that really had natural connections to Christ Church. Everybody else had moved in. So I think I was there just to try to achieve stability. I had a bunch of potlucks, we had big barbecues and just tried to get everybody together. I was kind of like the social chair of the church. And then so shift over to my oldest daughter, Megan. We were struggling with where she was going to go to school. And then in summer of 2011, I'd been at the church for a little over a year. Maxie Dunham, who had been kind of walking alongside us through this, he's like, isn't this great? You're working at the church, you're taking classes in seminary, you can take your time, you're kind of settled in. And just didn't settle, And the speech therapist had told us what Megan needed for school. She said she needs a 4-to-1 student-to-teacher ratio. She needs language development built into the school, and she was going to like 15 different appointments a week, and she goes, this is what she needs. This does exist, but it doesn't exist in Memphis. So we started looking at different schools, and we looked at a school in Franklin, Tennessee. We looked at a school in Durham, North Carolina, and it just didn't make sense to move just for the school. And these are like really expensive schools, right? And so I didn't have a job there. So I'm frustrated. I'm online one morning, and I am led to this website about the Lexington School, which is this private school in Lexington, Kentucky, that had started a program. I'm telling you, if you'd taken what the speech therapist had outlined, it was designed off of that. It was actually modeled off of the 2 schools we had looked at in Franklin and Durham. And we sent all of our information to them on Megan. About 2 weeks later, they come back to us. They say, Megan fits the mold here of a student that would really excel. And within 4 weeks, we made the decision to move to Lexington, Kentucky. which is only 10 miles from Asbury Theological Seminary, and enroll in full-time resident seminary. We needed, I mean, this, imagine like a St. George's, imagine Bodine, y'all are familiar with Bodine and St. George. Imagine rolling Bodine into St. George's. That's what this school was. So like you had all you needed as far as core education, but then you had the social, you had the sports, you had the clubs, you had recess, you had lunch, you had that with the rest of the school. But when it was time to learn, you were in this intensive format. And so really the first point I want to make, God goes ahead of us, right? So even though I'm running around kind of like a chicken with his head cut off, like God is staying very steady through all this. And he is already, so I've been fretting, I mean, we've been fretting for 2 years over what we were going to do about Megan's education. God, in the meantime, is preparing this place in Lexington. It started in fall of 2010. It was starting, they were raising money for it. We had no idea. I mean, we had no idea that this was going to be the perfect place for Megan. And we had no idea that it was going to be, and I tell this story a little differently depending on the audience. I say that we moved to Lexington because of the school. But really what it was is God knew he had to dislodge me from East Memphis in particular. He needed to dislodge me from a certain culture, and I had to have a completely different experience where I had my full focus on him. Not just me, but my entire family. And he provided that place for Megan, our most complex need. So the other need we had was, well, what do we do with our house here? So Crystal and I, we had been to Kentucky. We had made the decision to move. We were like, okay, we're going to try to sell the house. I remember kneeling in our den, and we said, God, we're going, and we're giving this house over to you, and you're going to figure out what to do with it. We're taking the step. Next morning, I'm walking through the church office at Christ Church, and overhear a conversation. It's a family. They've just filed for bankruptcy. They've got to pull their kids out of private school. They want to be in the White Station School District. They need to be in it in 2 weeks. And I hear the person they're talking to say, have you talked to Greg Spillyards? Because I think they're looking to move, and they might be willing to rent their house out. I put a lease together real quick. We had a lease, 3-year lease on our house for this family by the end of the week. And they could not afford to pay the mortgage and the taxes and insurance, the full price. There's about a $750 a month gap. And I'm like, God's clearly led them to us. This is the deal we're going to make. It's going to work. Sign the lease. I'm not kidding you. Shane Stanford, our senior pastor, who had only been on staff for about 2 weeks, comes in my office and he said, Greg, I know you're making this transition. Are there any financial gaps that the church, we have this grant. It's not just for tuition, but we can support you in any financial gaps. I said, well, yeah, there's a $750 a month gap. He goes, it's done. He said, we'll cover that. And so, and the other point is like when you are obedient, here I've been running now this has been 5 years, right? And I mean, kind of coming back to it, running away, coming back to it over 5 years. And all of a sudden we finally take that kind of next level obedience step of like handing the house over to God, seeing what God's done with it. And then how it blessed that family. I mean, they were in dire straits. And because we were obedient, God, you think he's just dealing with us, but he's got all this, he's got all the dynamics and he knows how he's fitting all the pieces in. So when we're obedient, it allows him to bless others. And that was just something that, our experience through that, pointed that out. And so we go to Kentucky. I had taken a lot of spiritual formation classes, a lot of vocational ministry classes. I had 23 hours. It mapped out for me to have a 96 credit hour MDiv and 3 resident seminary. So as soon as I got on campus, I started taking all the biblical studies. I'm 33 years old. I've got 3 daughters. I mean, we're in like the, flow of life, and all of a sudden it comes to a screeching halt. I was used to a 7:30 to 6:30 job, so I kind of took that mindset into seminary, treated it like a full-time job. I mean, I was taking languages, taking Greek, taking Hebrew. I was exegeting Ephesians, writing 65 pages on 3 verses, and which still blows my mind. I go back and read some of that stuff. I'm like, I think somebody like entered my body, and there's no way I could do that today. I don't think. But anyway, so I'd finished. So fast forward, Megan's in this program. The school, because it was an excellent school, like Emma, my middle daughter, she's like on the opposite end of the spectrum. I mean, we don't even know how she learned how to read. She was reading C.S. Lewis when she was 5. She's like, she has to have a different reading list. So Megan's, we're pulling Megan along through school, and we're trying to give Emma enough to keep her challenged in school. So this school they offered us financial aid. They offered for Emma to go there for free. So they're both in this school, and then Ellie was still, we called it farm school. We lived on this farm up in Kentucky, and Crystal, my wife, homeschooled Ellie. She said she went to farm school. But so when she she became school age, she would have gone into first grade our last year in seminary. And the school even said, when she's ready, like, all 3 of your girls can go here for the price of 1. And so keep in mind, I'm like susceptible to temptation, right? So I'm like, well, we'll just settle in here in Lexington. It's a pretty nice place to live. And so about midway through my seminary, finished biblical study, I was older, so I found myself hanging out with more of the doctoral students. I was over kind of in the Christian leadership side of campus, and started hearing about different models of ministry. And I was intrigued by forms of ministry that these doctoral students were identifying all over the world, and one of those was actually real estate development, and it was being done in Casca Viejo, Panama, right outside of Panama City. And I got really curious about what it might look like if I were to go back into some form of real estate, but with a different perspective. And thinking back on the experience of Bellbrook, what if I were to come back to Memphis and get plugged back in with a third-party real estate services firm, that could do the development services, they could do the brokerage, they could do the property management, and really angle that focus and that service level to the urban core of the city, to particular neighborhoods. But I didn't know exactly what that would look like. I'd kind of bounced the idea off of some of the guys at CB. And they liked the idea, but nobody really knew how it would make money. And so I'm thinking through this. It was spring of 14. I'm about to graduate with an MDiv, and a guy named Bob Lupton comes up to Wilmore to speak in our chapel service. And have y'all ever heard of Bob Lupton? He wrote Toxic Charity. He's a community developer and philanthropist in Atlanta. Pretty well known in like those circles, like Robert Montague. I mean, Robert Montague subscribes to Bob Lupton. He's kind of a mentor of his. Bob comes up to speak, and because I was part of this like kind of faith, work, and economics cohort at the time, I was able to spend the afternoon with him. And I explained to him what I wanted to do. I said, I want to go back to Memphis. And again, I mean, I was saying this, but I was also saying I really want to stay in Lexington. Like I think I could just make a career here. But I said I think I'm supposed to go back to Memphis, and I'm supposed to do real estate in the neighborhoods. I shifted from, it's not about the transaction. I want to do impactful real estate. And he said, that's what you're going to do. He said, I said, I'm on track to be ordained. He goes, well, you can stay on that track or not. He said, but you're going to go back to Memphis after you graduate, and you're going to find a sponsor. And they're going to sponsor you in this mission. I mean, he said it like he was prophesying. He was like, this is going to happen. And I thought, okay, I mean, I can't imagine. But so I graduate. The family who had been renting our house, the husband got this just awesome job in Austin, Texas, that required them to move a week before we moved back from Kentucky. I mean, and my wife and I, we've said it so many times, we're going to write a book called You Can't Make This Stuff Up. I mean, it was just crazy. They move out, we move in within a week, hang all the pictures in the old nail holes, put all the furniture back where it was 3 years before, It was like we had been to Oz, and we land back. I mean, I remember waking up that Sunday morning after we moved back. I mean, everything was exactly the same as it had been 3 years ago. I was getting up to go teach my parents' Sunday school class, and I told my wife, I'm like, was that a dream? Like, did we really go to Kentucky? I mean, it was crazy. I mean, it really was. Well, the guy who had been my brokerage assistant at CB had since gone to work at Commercial Advisors, and I'd stayed in touch with him, and I'd kind of been working through some of this stuff with him. He said, hey man, you really need to come over and just see our office. You need to talk to Larry Jensen. I think you need to share with him what you're thinking. And I'm like, yeah, sure, because I was talking to CB too. But CB was, they knew they were about to be acquired by the mothership, and they knew this. They loved the idea. I mean, but they didn't think this would jive with the analysts. Every 90 days, like, okay, well, how's this community development service line doing? Well, it's sucking wind. I'd probably be out the door in 90 days. So I sit down with Larry 2 weeks after I moved back. I stumble through this kind of articulation of what I'm thinking about doing. And he looks at me and he says, I've wanted to do something like this for 10 years. He said, he said, I haven't had the bandwidth to do it. I serve on, he said, about 50% of my time serving on boards. He said, honestly, I haven't met a broker who is willing to step away from the transactional flow to put time into this. And that's really the third and last point is you take the next step and you do follow a path that God's laying out in front of you that if we're honest, if we're really honest and we pray about it, like we can see it. We know where God's leading us. I mean, it may take a while, but He'll show you where He's leading. He's also going to prepare other people to go with you. He doesn't call anybody to go out on their own. You can look back at, Jesus sent them out 2 by 2. He brought 12 disciples together. Then He had a smaller core within that group. And I just became a real believer in that like Larry had been prepared, his heart had been prepared to be open enough for this. And so because I needed a job when we moved back, I went straight back to work at Christ Church. But I told them, I said, this is just temporary. I'm angling to go back into commercial real estate, but kind of in a different way, which they were fully supportive of, which I'm very thankful for. I mean, they got it. They really understood the critical need for theologically trained or theologically formed ministers in the workplace. And so they were fully supportive. They had, at this point, poured about $90,000 into our education, into supporting us. And they're like, no, I was almost like a sent missionary for them. And but they did, the job they gave me was basically to visit people in the hospitals and do funerals. And the month I started in June of 2014, we had 13 deaths in the church. So I'm like thrown into this whole thing and thrown into it enough to know I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life. Although something very mysterious happens to with our relationship with Christ when we walk into a hospital room. It is an amazing thing. That's for another day. But so the 3 points really: God goes ahead of us. Our obedience allows God to bless others along the way, and the mission or path that God's leading you to, He's also called others to as well. So know that you're not being called out on your own. And just another part of the story, we were part of this awesome education program in Lexington, and something that really didn't exist here. And so Megan, she still needed like a small ratio. She still needed a small class. Couldn't really find the right solution. My wife she homeschooled her for a couple of years, but she loved school. She's very social. She's really into theater. So we met with every independent school in Memphis, asking if they would be interested in us just paying for them to go to Lexington to see the school. And our 2 youngest daughters are at St. Mary's. St. Mary's is kind of like, well, we're in the middle of the strategic plan and we don't have the space, blah, blah, blah. So we did get a lot of receptivity at St. Agnes, St. Dominic. Tom Hood and I actually went up and toured the schools up there. But then someone came to us and they said, you really should talk to Holy Rosary. I think that Holy Rosary would be interested in doing something like this. They've already got a program called the Angel Program for autism. And they've had a history of being open-minded to this type of thing. So we go meet with Holy Rosary. Come to find out the priest is dyslexic. So the priest is like, yeah, we need to do this. I barely got through school, this is something we definitely need to do. So we took them all to Lexington and toured Lexington School. And then while we were in Lexington, living there, the Lexington Catholics started a program that matched this. And so we took them to Lexington Catholic. And then my wife actually started teaching. We started the program at Holy Rosary. My wife started teaching in the program. Became certified in all the ways you need to be certified to teach this particular, need. And so that's become a huge blessing. We went from 4 students to like 16 students in a year. Now I think they have 28 students over there. My wife discovered that her call is actually teaching. She had been an audiologist, but this girl is truly one of the most gifted teachers I've ever seen in my life. I mean, she is just so, last night I'm watching her, she hasn't looked at a geometry book since high school, and she's helping the girls with geometry. And she's like, it's just amazing. So she was there teaching. Megan obviously is now in high school, so St. Benedict, Duncan Williams, his daughter is in the program. Duncan's like, we've got to figure out something for us, as our daughter's coming up through here. So he paid for us to take a whole host of people to the school in Durham, to Lexington, to model a program at St. Benedict. So that's where Megan's in school. She's a junior. She's in the National Honor Society. She absolutely loves school. She's already getting things in the mail from colleges, and it's like, and so all this is just, again, you can't make this stuff up. And what's the next part of this journey? I don't know. What the kind of the tail end of it. I'd been doing the community work. 2017, our company goes through a whole organizational restructuring. Sitting there minding my own business one afternoon, working on a deal, and Larry comes to me and he said, he goes, have you thought about being more in leadership here? I'm like, no, I actually haven't. I kind of like what I'm doing. I was helping Port of Leith open academies. I was working on getting Claiborne Temple transitioned. I was working with Advanced Memphis on buying warehouses. Like that's what I wanted to keep doing. I really didn't care about the money. That's just like what I wanted to do. And he goes, he said, we're going to transition here, and we need a new president over our asset services division, which was at the time 42 employees and 30 million square feet of space under management and leasing. And I'm like, Larry, what made you come to me? He goes, he said, Lisa, his wife, he goes, she said last night she thinks you're the person to do it. Like, I've met Lisa like twice. I don't know what I did to deceive her into thinking that I was more capable than I am, but he gave me about 2 weeks to think about it. And then I transitioned into that, was in that role for 2 years. And then Larry comes to me in February of 19 and says, hey, I'm ready to drop the day-to-day management stuff. I just want to focus on brokerage and the boards I'm on. He goes, would you be willing to come on board as the CEO and managing director of the firm? I said, Larry, if this is what you need to transition into your next season, sure. Said I'd do it. A week later, I'm sitting with the lead team and one of our consultants, and I tell them I changed my mind. I didn't want to do it. I'm like, I don't want to do this. And they all look at me like, yeah, no, you're going to do this. You're going to do it. And the consultant was like, this isn't a life sentence. This is a season, just like everything else has been a season. And I do believe that, I now believe after being in the role for 2.5 years, like clearly, I think I was the only person who could have come in, and I think I was just uniquely qualified to be in this role at this time. How long that's for, I don't know. It could, if God makes it clear, I'll tell you this, if God makes it clear that I'm supposed to transition into a different role, I'm not doing the 5-year running game anymore. I mean, like, I'm going. And Larry knows that. And the company knows that. I mean, I'm pretty open about it. I'm constantly thinking through who's my successor there. Constantly thinking through, am I still the right leader for the company in this season? Which the answer is still yes to that. But things change. The world's changing. Our industry's changing. Our industry's been changing for a while, and I think the pandemic and all that's going on right now. Our industry it's only accelerated. So, what does all that look like? So again, the 3 points: God goes ahead of us. Our obedience allows God to bless others, and whatever path you're being called to, or you believe you're supposed to go down, just know you're not called to go it alone. And there are other people out there that God's calling to join you in that. So I'd tell people. I wasn't so much theologically trained as I was theologically formed. So my worldview, like, truly, I don't think it would have happened if I just stayed here and done the online thing, even though that's now a major initiative that I'm supposed to push as a board member of Asbury Theological Seminary. I needed to be plucked out. And I needed a season seeing people. I'm sure y'all haven't been to Wilmore. This is a little bitty town on a dead end road that dead ends into the Kentucky River that literally has people from all over the world living in it. And they're all there for one reason, and it's to be theologically trained to go back out and preach and teach. So I was around, it was the community aspect of that was so impactful. So yeah, do I go around? I don't go around quoting scripture verses or espousing my theological thoughts on everything, but people see it through the way I make decisions, through the way I listen and respond. My temperament is totally different than it was 12 years ago. It's interesting. Strength finders. My strength finder changed. Or not my strength finder, but what's the one where ESTJ thing? It changed during seminary, and so so we have this consultant that's really good about speaking from a very foundational, biblically principled place when he's in mixed company, but when he's among believers, he's much more specific and he's much more, explicit, as far as, he points to particular stories in Scripture and to make a point. That's what I'm trying to be more of. We have incredibly strong, faithful believers in our office. We also have atheists. We have agnostics. That I'm not going to. I'm not going to treat one any differently, but I will approach my language a little differently. I was just telling them a story before we started. I hired a strategist a year and a half ago who's agnostic. He's intentional about saying his wife's atheist, he's agnostic. But he and I work very closely together. I would even say, he has been key to my leadership, my effective leadership in the company. He knows where I'm coming from. I respect him and his searching. But last January, he's like, "Hey, Greg, Advanced Memphis is having this gospel-based trauma healing." He said, "I think we need to go to that." I agree, but I didn't think you would be the one to suggest it. And he and I go to this trauma healing class, and the guy shows up. So I'm there. I got my bag from the office. I got my computer. I got notebooks. I'm all settled in for the trauma healing. Dude, the agnostic walks in with a Bible, hardback Bible that he bought at a bookstore on the way there, and that's all he had. And I just started laughing, because I said, "Did you already have that Bible?" "No, I picked it up on the way here." And I'm like, he's probably got it more figured out than most of the people in our churches, because he's not, I mean, now, where he and I will probably start to have more direct conversation is that you're never going to like wrap your head around God, right? I mean, you're never going to reason yourself into faith. So quit trying to do that. You got to kind of fall into it. You got to lean into it and then let him pick you up and take you from there. But yeah, I mean, can I exegete a passage still? Do I still know Hebrew? Do I still know Greek? I mean, well, I didn't really keep it up, which I had to confess to one of my professors 3 weeks ago at the board faculty retreat. But
it's true about pastors too.
Yeah, right. I know. I do look it up though, and I do cross check when a pastor starts referencing and talking about what the Greek word is. I'm in my lexicon on my phone, like, well, I'm not sure that's exactly the verb tense. So anyway, I do some of that, but. So, the people in my life, my wife and I were usually on different pages every time. It was like when she was not in a moment of doubt, I was. Usually when I was, now that created a lot of tension. But I mean, it was always something circumstantial that would happen that would like shake me back into real. I mean, it was those you can't make this up moments, and even Maxie kind of makes fun of me because he's like, you guys were just, it's like God had to put a flashing neon sign in front of you for you to know this is what you were supposed to do, and that neon sign truly was the Lexington School and Megan having a place. But consistency. We continued to. The fact that we were there in worship when they had that. I don't know how that really a lot hinged on that moment when we made that physical walk down the aisle. That was something that we kept going back to. Like almost like it created this accountability. Well, what are we going to do about it? And even the doubts. I still wonder if it's like I never will doubt the seminary experience. I'll never doubt whether that was the right thing to do or not. It was so impactful on our family and our spiritual life. I do constantly wrestle with is this the right role? Is this what I'm supposed? How long? And I do believe it is, but like how long? And so you constantly have this doubt, and I struggle now too with like the whole cultural, what's going on culturally among evangelicalism, and I struggle with like how long, what's going to happen? With culture and faith, and I'm starting to doubt like church format. Like I'm starting to doubt, is this the way we're supposed to be doing it? I'm wrestling with all that. So my doubts become probably more complex and more, but it's consistency. It's keep showing up, keep looking for God. He's, again, you can't make this stuff up moments. All of a sudden I'd be like, gosh, I'm such a fool. Why am I doubting?